I would love to dig into the part about the question of trading 2024 wins for future wins, which was kind of explicitly stated throughout the offseason. Some
Mhm.
of the public speculation surrounding your kind of your suggestions that the picking of a lane will happen, but you're not there yet, has meant people. There's been an assumption on the part of some that means you aren't at a point where you would think about trading future wins for 2024 wins. Is that inaccurate? Are you open-minded now to the idea? Has the play of the team through the first half of the season suggested to you that you at least have to consider trading future wins for now wins?
I mean, I think I have to be open-minded, right? I think, as easy, as convenient as it would be to say, hey, this is the plan in February, and we are going to adamantly adhere to it, irrespective of anything, kind of that might come up that would force us to change is just so unlikely to happen. It would be irresponsible. It would be foolish. I think those that I have seen have success in this position have the ability to be nimble, to adapt, and to factor in all of the considerations that one needs to be mindful of when approaching a trade deadline.
So along those lines, it's interesting to me to look back a year ago when you were still with the Cubs front office, and that was kind of a wild ride, right? Like in the month leading up to the deadline, everyone in the world thought that you guys were going to be sellers at the All-Star break, and then you guys rip off an 8-game winning streak and end up being buyers, acquiring Candelario as one of the biggest position players available. Can you take me through that is that part of the reason why you haven't identified the lane that you're going to travel, just the prior experience that you have in terms of the U-turns that are possible in the month of July?
Yeah. Well, I think to some degree we're all shaped by our experiences, right? And that's the most recent for me. But nonetheless, I think what it took was an appreciation for all of the information that we had in front of us, and that information was changing every single day. And I think it's a good reminder not to get so overly caught up in playoff probabilities day to day, because with every game that you play, or every game that someone that you might be chasing or who's chasing you is plays, those fluctuate. And I think you have to zoom out a bit and kind of try to see the big picture. And when your team goes on a run and wins 8 games in a row, that has to matter. That has to be meaningful. Again, we're here to try to win as many big league games as we possibly can, and not to it's building out a robust, healthy farm system is one path toward sustainability, and we have to be mindful of that. But at the end of the day, we're not here to win farm system rankings. We're here to win big league games.
And so, Craig, as you've gotten immersed here over the last 6 months, your relationship with ownership develops, right? And you get to know each other better. Talk about the conversations as they happen now. How involved? What kind of guidance? Is it you going to them to sort of lay out your vision? Is it them coming to you? Here's what we're thinking. And of course, the question we always have to ask: where does Theo factor into all of this as you get near a trade deadline?
Yeah, well, I saw Theo on this podcast a few weeks ago, right? So you guys are pretty attuned to his whereabouts as well. No, Theo is obviously a great resource, as with respect to approaching a deadline, to the numerous considerations that need to be factored in here, to providing me insight, sometimes in terms of more day-to-day minutia, and often more just kind of big picture. Obviously a guy with an incredible resume of success in this sport and in this city. But in terms of my relationship communication with ownership, I try to be as proactive as possible, and kind of lay out, how I'm thinking about this, the different approaches that we can take. And, look, there are a limited number of paths here, right? There's, kind of add to the team. There's, trade away from the team, and then there's do nothing. And I am adamant about picking a lane, and kind of will remain so. But ownership is incredibly engaged. Our interactions day to day are typically focused on the team and the game and the events. But John and Mike and Tom and Sam and Theo are, they're watching every single pitch, and we're commenting on, Cutter's efficiency last night, the ability for Rafi to hit a a ball, about a foot and a half outside, 420 plus feet in New York. And so, I think they are enjoying this successful run as much as we are.
I always find there's sort of there's the micro and macro to an extent as you approach a trade deadline, right? What the team is doing on the field will ultimately dictate where you go, how you improve, or if you sell, right? But there's also sort of where the organization is, where the franchise is, and it's an interesting time right now in Red Sox Nation, right? The fans, they just want to see you spend. I think if they had their way, you would just tell them you're going to spend as much money as possible and everyone's going to be happy, which is obviously not the goal. The goal is not to have the highest payroll. That's not what you set out to do. But does that factor in? Where does sort of this point in time of the Boston Red Sox, does that factor into anything, or do you have to make sure you're blocking that out and solely focusing on what this group of players is doing on the field right now?
Well, I would take probably those comments about fans just want us to spend a step further and say, I think fans just want us to win. And I think if we were to win, which is our goal, that is our mission here, and by far our most important North Star, I think generally the fans in Boston support that. And if we were to spend a ton of money and lose, my guess is they would be frustrated and rightfully so. I think the most important thing that I can do is anchor myself to what I believe is best for the organization. And what's best for the organization is often balancing what's best in the short term and what's best in the long term. And it's a really difficult line to straddle. But this is a really difficult job. But I think, one thing that's important to call out here, I think, is that we all kind of have different jobs, whether it's the ownership group or me or Alex and our coaches or our players, right? I think our players are rightfully consumed with doing everything they possibly can to prepare to win tonight's game. I think Alex and the staff are doing everything that they can do to, review the information, to understand the matchups, to think through the right pinch hitting opportunities and bullpen matchups in order to give us the best chance of winning a game. Almost independent of who the 26 guys are on the roster in the clubhouse on any given day. And my job is to try to equip them with the best 26 players that we can find. And so, when you appreciate that kind of nuance, everyone has a job that they can do. And while there's interactions across all of us and a ton of communication, I think to some degree that those jobs are almost independent in a way. And I think that can be refreshing.
To me, it was one of the things that's interesting to hear is some of the metaphors that you've employed, which seem contradictory, right? Like, straddling the line for the past, for the present, and the future is one, and yet picking a lane is another. This is a difficult way of driving, and yet I suppose eventually you'll get to one of the lanes as you straddle that line. But one question that's been raised with regards to figuring out those two things is whether or not there's a scenario in which you could trade guys who are pending free agents, yet address longer term needs, and whether or not that would represent picking a lane, or whether or not that would represent kind of the muddle that you've been trying to avoid. What are your thoughts on that?
I was thinking there's some metaphor here, so it's like driving in the shoulder or something. I'm not sure, but
watch out for the rumble strip.
I think right. So I think that. At the risk of overcomplicating this, I think you can try to balance short and long term. I think you can move the organization in the right direction, but you have to be convicted in the short term execution of whatever the steps are that will get you there. And that's what I mean by picking a lane. Now, conceptually, it sounds great to balance those things out by kind of doing the buy, sell, add, and subtract. I think what often happens when you try to go down both paths is you end up with neither. It's really, really complicated to successfully execute that. And so, to me, the one thing that, we need to do is determine what we are trying to accomplish and be completely convicted and decisive in accomplishing that. And the one thing that the team can do to help us, make that determination is win as many games as possible over the next 3 or 4 weeks.